Hi once again. So it's Keith, and perhaps looking a little different. But so in the few moments that I spent away from the camera and perhaps making the last video, I got something that really it really struck my understanding and integrity. But these are things that normally do or keep on reoccurring from time to time because for some reason by the time I can have the courage or the confidence to make a video, it's because something has kind of taken shape in a sense that I'm confident about it, either due to the fact that I've thought through it so many times, or my point of observation to it has at least given me the confidence good enough to perhaps discuss about it. I certainly do not like to be in the position of an adult, perhaps that imposes their views on other people, and that is to hopefully maintain a good integrity between myself and the other identities that take shape in the human life or society. So the topic is really going to be about the basic needs of man, because for as far as the education system goes, or perhaps for as far as people go to school to learn about different things, you find out that the end or the climax of this learning that happens in school lands you in a position where you have to perhaps get something that you are qualified in, and something that is going to be specific in a sense that you can have a certain source of employment or a certain type of employment that gives you a source of income, and perhaps to use that resource of money that comes in form of income to live a daily life or get around acquiring certain things that could support you in living a normal and daily life, on the basis of how other people might live their lives or how other people might do things. So that concept is one that really varies across the different categories of human beings that we have on earth, because certainly not everyone gets a formal type of education that you could imagine from what I just explained, and we see that people get other forms of education that are certainly based upon the practical involvement of themselves in certain activities, and from these activities they get to learn how to do something new, and with continuity of practice they become masters at what they are doing. So education varies, and different people tend to specifically pick up on different forms of education depending on what satisfies uh, them at the moment or in that particular situation. So with that, being said, I oh, I had this thought cross my mind of, with everything being said and done, what does it come down to when you are trying to look at the basic needs of a human being? And that I am looking at the basic needs of a human being in comparison to, say, the other species of animals that live on Earth or that pertain a certain form of life on Earth. So that is really kind of broad, because when you look at how the other animals live on Earth, they also have their different variances depending on the species or depending on the shape of life that they often live, and that is kind of clear. So we go back to the human being. So what are the basic needs of a human being, since I am in the category of a human being, and perhaps a person that might listen to this video or that might have a chance to view this is a human being that understands English, or perhaps is getting a translation of what I'm saying to at least understand the point that I'm trying to make. So the basic needs of man are food, water, clothes, and shelter. These are kind of inflated, or they can, this list of the four needs can be exaggerated, inflated, or perhaps might also vary from person to person depending on how they perceive life or how they live life. And I say that because the species of human beings have, in a sense, tried to evenly spread themselves across the globe or in different locations of Earth, in a sense that they kind of have a different type of living life when these locations change. So that's why I'm saying that really varies. But when you take this list back to the essence of looking at a human being as an animal, this list really, or to a certain extent, satisfies the human being in whatever situation that they might be in. Because if they get something to eat, whether they pick it on a tree in the forest, or whether they are able to go buy it since they have the money to do so, or whether they are able to do the farming to get this food, in a way they find themselves having to get food, because it's one thing that no one tries to live without. The water is another is another aspect that comes in form of a need. You can, look at the way animals tend to live around the water bodies because they can have access to water on perhaps days that are like those that they need the water, since thirsty is something that the human beings get. So I believe the animals might also have a sense of getting thirsty. We then turn our eyes to the clothing. Why would human beings need clothes and other animals do not? And that is easily explainable by the first point that I made, that, okay, not the first point, but the point that I made previously, by saying that human beings have evenly distributed themselves on Earth in different locations. And these different locations have different climatic environments. So in these different climatic environments, you find out that at some point human beings have to either dress up or have clothing that can keep them warm or that can sustain their warmth for them to live or for them to survive in the location that they're in. Or they could have a type of clothing that is really light or that is not as heavy as you could imagine, because they are in a location that has plenty of sunshine or perhaps plenty of heat, in that having many layers of clothes on the body would not serve them correctly, since they have to let their bodies lose heat as they try to survive. Then you also take a look at the shelter. It also boils down to the different locations in which human beings are living. Some might want to live in the simple shelters that don't have many details to them, and some people might have shelters that perhaps are made up of many details. And that, I mean, the different types of building across the different locations on Earth vary depending on how the climate treats the people there. So if these are the four needs that the human beings rotate around, there is something about the animals that really strikes a very big difference between the human being and the animal, in that the animals tend to naturally live outside. The animals tend to naturally not have clothing on their bodies because maybe they have skin and fur. So these differences come up because over time we can see that, or we can concede to the fact that human beings have undergone or have faced something that we might know as an evolution process. So that concept plays in to an extent as to why we have to dress up and we have to have a certain type of housing to live comfortably on Earth. But at the basic formation of man, without these additional ideas that keep playing on in life, they would perhaps be living outside, or they would perhaps not be building and instinctively looking for locations or positions in which they can live without having to build. So that is a factor that plays out for many reasons, not just evolution, but also the increase in numbers and things of that sort. Because when a certain species is being distributed by itself over various locations of the earth, then the multiplication easily triples or doubles or increases. So as it increases, these things now start to play out as essential necessities. So these are the essential needs that a human being needs or requires to live a life. With that aside, I would like to switch off that topic and then go to the topic of security and insecurity. So what is security? Security is the state of freedom or being free from danger or threat. Then what is insecurity? It's a state of being open to danger or threat or lack of protection in a sense. And what are the things that cause insecurity to the human being? Or what are the things that bring security to the human life? The things that bring security are the food, the shelter, the clothing, and the water. What brings the insecurity, or what poses as a threat? The lack of food, the lack of shelter, the lack of water, and the lack of clothing. And if these 4 factors play out like that, then how is it that the earth is being depleted to fulfill these needs, but it cannot be replenished still by the same human beings that are doing it? Because in the video of point of view, I mentioned that how is it that human beings that are, say, the 4th in intelligence, according to, the different animal species that we have on Earth, how is it that they are the 4th in intelligence and are not able to do something like replenishing the deserts with forestry or forests that can help in the consumption of the carbon emissions that are being given off by the human beings while they try to attain the needs that support them in daily life. And how is it that their imprint on nature is far beyond or far more larger than all the other animals altogether? And how are they working towards at least putting a stop to that say depletion, or to that carbon imprint that is being left? Because every time it's being left, there are consequences to it. And what are the consequences? Like I said, some animals, you find out that they really get extinct in places of deserts. So how would animals get extinct in deserts? And if so, or if you were to look at that part of life alone, is it that the deserts have been there from before and the animals just magically went there to, perhaps have the extinction in the desert? Or it's something different? And the other point that you could also look at is how is it that we cannot see the difference between the regions of the earth that have so much green in them and the type of life that plays out where there's a density of green life to mean forests, and the places on earth that do not have the green life. Like, how is it that we do not get to at least try and make a comparison between these two environments and try to change what is happening on or in a side of an environment that doesn't have the trees, like a desert? Another point that I would like to, focus on is about the snow. When you experience the snow in the places that have it, it turns out that when that season of snow comes in, everything tends to go back on reset, in that the leaves fall and the trees are, not having any coverage on them, and then it's easy for wind to go through the place. But as it does, you find out that the colder it gets, the less carbon you experience within the atmosphere or within the air that you breathe. And from the less carbon that you're experiencing, you tend to have more oxygen. You tend to have an environment that is really quiet, or that has a certain sort of silence that is so big, in that it shows you that the snow itself has put a standstill to the traffic of the human beings that could potentially create carbon emissions, or that could potentially heat up the place so much or good enough to an extent that you can breathe air that feels like it has an element of carbon residues in it. So if that happens when the snow plays out, does it show you how the snow is something that comes down on the earth or plays out on the earth to kind of reset the carbon emissions, or reset the environment that has so much carbon in it, and trap it in the snowflakes that fall down to the ground, in that when they fall down to the ground and stay in a certain place for so long, this carbon can easily be filtered back into the ground and not remain in the atmosphere. So the natural intelligence of the earth is doing that. I once looked at a video that was talking about how the earth breathes whenever these seasons come around, whenever the winter seasons come around, and I'm like, why would somebody perceive the earth to be breathing at these moments? It's breathing because there is an exchange of air that is happening, And what is the exchange? The exchange is taking out the carbon dioxide and retaining the oxygen, because any process of breathing that happens in a human being is taking in the oxygen and replacing the carbon dioxide. So if we pose food, shelter, and water plus clothing as our priority of insecurities, and we go as far as we can to create a security in these 4 areas, then are we creating a security in another area of the earth by acquiring what we need to live? Or are we creating an insecurity still on the same earth by the actions that we take to acquire the needs that we require to certainly survive on earth? Because we are doing very many activities in the pursuit of trying to acquire the food, trying to acquire the water, trying to acquire the clothing and the shelter. And I might not deeply discuss on how people, tend to go around looking for these things, or the means and the tactics that they devise to acquire these things. However, I would like to mention that we in a category, we as human beings in a category of animals also have the similarities that, or we share some similarities with the animals. And what are these similarities? That if animals need food, they can get food, and we might also need food and we get food. If they need water, they get the water, and if we need water, we can also get the water. If they need the shelter, say, okay, depending on a rainy day or a sunny day or whatever condition it might be, the animal can easily adapt to the environment that they're in and perhaps survive. Same applies to the human beings. They can devise different means to acquire a certain sort of shelter so that they can survive. If it comes to the clothing, we have not gone an extra mile to make our bodies mutate or perhaps become adaptive to the different climatic environments that we experience on Earth. So because of that, we certainly tend to depend on the clothing to do that. So the animals might not depend on the clothing, but they depend on mutating their body or their skin to adapt to the condition that they are living in. So with that being said, how are we leaving a mark with whatever we are doing to acquire what we need to live? And how are the other animals leaving a mark with whatever they are doing to try and acquire what they want to live? And who in the picture is creating a disadvantage for the rest of the animals? Because, like I said, every animal is practically rotating around the same idea of survival or of life. And how is it that we are able to take steps to change or to realize what is going on? Because unless you sit down to make an observation and realize what is going on, then you might never be able to deal with it. But if you can take time and have that, or do that research that you want to do, or make the observations that you have to make just to understand what is going on, then it's easy to perhaps take a step to change and do something different. I wouldn't like to go too far with discussing or repeating the same points and ideas, but maybe I've been able to drive a point home for whoever is listening or whoever takes the time to understand what I'm saying. I certainly do not practice writing down the points or perhaps having a script that I'm reading to you, because I generally do not do that. Or I might do it if it is really necessary to do it, but given the chance, I will discuss with you everything that naturally processes itself within the mind, and at least give you that idea, so that if you're in a position, because if you're in a position to perhaps take a step of action, you can take that step of action and create a difference with the knowledge or the information that you have acquired. I might not want to refer you to different sources and this and that, because at the end of the day, if I start to refer you or to anybody that is listening to go and do their research, it means that it would now create an uphill for that person to try and understand whatever research they get, and as they try to understand it, it might perhaps bury them in a road that doesn't lead them to taking action or taking the required action that has to be taken to perhaps create a change. Clues about the actions. The actions are quite simple, but apparently the laziness within our species has, continuously given a message that is perhaps perhaps like an instinct that you can get what you need when you perhaps do certain things, or you have a certain resource, and you would not have to mind about what else plays into the process of how you got what you needed. So that easily relates to why people want to get rich, why people want to get wealthy, because when you're rich, you can get anything you want, and it just takes a snap. I have the money to do it, and I'll get it, or I have the means to get it, so I can get it because I'm rich. But even after you get it and you're comfortable, have you taken time to look at whatever it took for you to get what you're getting? Because the farmer doesn't tell you that he had to cut down acres of trees, perhaps to start the farmland, and perhaps, grow crops or set up greenhouses that produce crops on a very large scale for everyone that is depending on the factor of being rich to acquire that. Or you won't have the builder or the realtor or maybe the landlord tell you that the house that you're living in has been made with this amount of wood, and this amount of wood equates to 30 trees or 40 trees. And of these 40 trees, most of what hasn't been used has maybe gone to waste, like burning and perhaps making another resource like mulch now for the farms. And perhaps I will not tell you that, or perhaps a person that sells the clothes to you is not going to tell you that for them to make that cloth, they had to perhaps use cotton or silk or whatever material it might be. But for them to acquire a basic that is used across many different types of clothes, which is cotton, they had to plow fields to do that. And as they plow fields, certain species of plants are taken out, so they are no more. And because they are no more, the ecosystem that they have been trying to create to absorb the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere is no longer there. And if it's no longer there, and these are perennial crops or perhaps crops that come in and go out, the land is also going to face phases of being empty because the markets vary and all of that. You also take a look at, say, the water. Nobody is going to tell you how the water gets to you, but in a certain way it's getting to you, and you do not know if there's some more water where that water is coming from and what you need to do to maybe look for another source. You just keep taking water. Why? Because you have the money to do it and you can do it. So in a certain sense, it kind of becomes a pointless point, or a point that is pointless. You're getting what you need to live, but you do not know what it takes for you to get these things, or you do not know the process that these things have taken to get to you, and you don't know which imprint or which mark the processes are taking before they make it look as though it's gold on your table. So it's very good to listen and understand that I am not trying to push an argument. I am simply trying to discuss with you so that then you can understand certain things that are perhaps not refined in the way that they are given to you when you're going through school, or when you're going through different forms of education that you go through to acquire that skill that is going to earn you money, or that is going to earn you the income that you use to now acquire these other resources that you need to perhaps live a good life. My video is long, but man, it's how I speak, or it's how I talk, and perhaps to make a point without writing things down and all that might take a longer time than if everything is written down. But I wouldn't like to write down things to now slow down the encoding process or the understanding process that it takes for one to listen to a message and process it the way it has to be processed. And perhaps I also don't like to make many points of various things. I would like to focus on a certain topic and give it the best of my understanding, so that then it makes perfect sense to the other person. And like I said, if it makes perfect sense, then it gives one that has the capability, or that has that that has the resources that it takes to now make an action or take action to replenish everything that is being taken out to satisfy your needs. Because what is being taken out to satisfy your needs is also vital in another aspect, because it supports the life of you as a human being and even other animals or other species of animals. So the action that you're taking is really serving to the betterment of so many other things. And it's what I would really appreciate of whoever listens to my message. And once again, my name is Keith. I don't like to be serious for too long. Perhaps I like to joke about things, but yeah, as we joke and make fun and get happy about the fact that we have our needs, we should also take a certain step in another direction. So thank you for listening. I hope you can like, share, and subscribe. I hope you can comment if you have a chance to. And perhaps I hope we might see a better world with the information that you get. You could have a great time, and let me see how I get myself to do something else, or something that at least might get me the resources, like money, to now take the steps that I'm explaining to you, or to now help another person do perhaps what I might not be able to do in the position that I'm in. And it's how the world works, I guess. Get the basic needs, and when you have the basic needs, whatever is surplus, do the right thing with it, rather than boasting about it, or rather than perhaps doing something else with it. I wouldn't like to imagine the possibilities that play out with that, but obviously I'm just at least leaving a record of the few observations that I make. So I hope you like it. I hope you like it, but I hope you can also understand that you have a responsibility over the app, because in the intelligent species, you take up the 4th position, so that really counts and matters. So thank you.